Thank you for clicking on my video. Just wanted to talk a bit because I noticed today when I was doing some infested survival on Terrorim that I had accidentally clicked on the non-steel path survival today. And I noticed after killing the first couple of enemies um, that my weapon, I was using the Strun shotgun, a heavy multi-shot shotgun, that my damage had appeared to go up from the non-steel path regular star chart. My damage had actually increased substantially on the steel path star chart, and I wanted to talk about this phenomena because I've actually been asked about this, and it does have some interesting implications, which I'm going to talk about. But I wanted to talk about what this phenomena is, and then lead into, more importantly, how we can abuse it. So I am going to be using the Panzer for this. I am currently using the Synapse with this build. Aptitude, Galvanized Chamber, Shred, Hellfire, crit damage, critical delay, Bane, and munitions. All the good stuff. But basically, the Synapse, unmodded, has 100% innate corrosive, and it's a particularly nasty weapon if you've never used it. Oh, and also primary merciless. But I've put on Hellfire to give us heat, and because it is a crit focused weapon, 100 munitions as well. And I'm going to use this to demonstrate the effect. But as we shoot an enemy, our damage will actually go up a lot. Let's put some weak guys in first so we can get those merciless stacks. All right. Then we'll test on max level. And I want you to notice the um, base damage. It starts out at 90. Now I'm hitting 5, 10, 16, 26k at the end. See how it accelerates? And I wanted to talk about this phenomena because it has interesting implications with how elements scale. And I haven't heard it referred to as anything, but I call it self-priming. Panzer helping us out with the viral, giving us that nice multiplier and adaptation stack. See it again there, start out hundreds, by the time it's at the end, it's hitting for 12k. It's the same weapon though. But it has interesting implications in terms of how specific elements interact with themselves. There are a couple elements in the game, particularly viral, corrosive, magnetic is included while shields are up, and heat. Where just by having them on the weapon, even if I were to only deal just heat damage, the effects that these weapons have in turn boost themselves. So viral, its status effect applies a virus, more or less, that causes the enemy to take essentially 4 times damage. It's like 4.25, or is it 3? It's either 4 times or it's like 375%. I forget the exact number, but it gives a multiplier to the damage that it takes. And by having viral and doing viral on an enemy that doesn't have armor, it will then boost itself further by giving bonus damage and ignoring. Obviously, in viral, it can't ignore anything, so it boosts itself again. With corrosive, when you deal corrosive damage, and that's actually to talk specifically about what I'm talking about. Let me pull up the actual mod set. I am actually talking about this 20 damage, not the corrosive status. But when you deal a corrosive proc, it reduces the enemy's armor by a little bit. When you have 10 stacks, it reduces it 80%. Heat is in this boat as well, that heat will then further reduce the enemy's armor by 50%, its remaining armor, for an effective total of a 90% armor reduction. But that's not the entire case, and that's not exactly true in terms of what the effect that we care about is. When you have corrosive on a enemy that has 10 corrosive stacks, the enemy, say this imaginary enemy, has 1,000 armor. Okay. Corrosive at 10 stacks will reduce the enemy armor by 80%, which means it currently has 200. Heat will then remove 50% of the remaining armor down to 100. Well, what this means is you would assume, okay, so I'm shooting at an enemy that has 100 armor effectively, and that is true. But then what also happens is when you look at corrosive, it has the plus 75 bonus damage on it. But the other part is each of those green numbers double dips, and the negative ones also do. Is that it will then ignore 75, this portion of your damage, will then ignore 75% of the remaining armor. So if an enemy starts out at 1,000, it's been status effect reduced down to 100. And then the corrosive portion of my damage will then ignore 75% of that 100. And it will effectively, for this portion of my damage, only be going through 25 armor, which is a glass cannon enemy. And that armor, or that damage value, so it's a 2-factor value, or calculation, so it reduces the armor all the way down. And then whatever that new damage calculation result is, it then boosts it by 75. So with multi-shot weapons in particular, it's more noticeable with the galvanized aptitude set, is when you shoot a multi-shot weapon multiple times, is that the status effects are building. Particularly these two are culprits. But with a multi-shot weapon particularly, let me actually get the strun. Because I was doing a gas build earlier. Ooh, definitely not that. Let's get corrosive on here. Let's do a weak heat. Good enough. Is against super weak enemies. We'll reduce these back down. Okay. 530, 530. Gaining merciless stacks. Alright, we're at 12. 1600. 592. It looked like 2000, 2700, 600 something. Okay, 1600, 700. Now let's shoot at a tankier enemy. $200, 1300. Now we're seeing a lot more numbers. And I'm actually doing more damage, even though each individual damage source is less. You're actually seeing more damage. It's because the other bullets, the nearest shot when I shoot at something, like say here, hold on, let me get it off to the side. The shoulder counts first, which is then applying the galvanized stack to the rest of them. If the first one procs a stack. See, now we're doing thousands again, like 3500s. Which is more than what we were doing before. With the exception of like that headshot. 2342. Low thousands, high low 3000s, high 2000s. Saw 2600s, saw 3900. But you can see the effect of the damage actually going up with the enemy being higher. So if you're doing star chart stuff and you're worried about going to steel path and you have a heavy multi-shot weapon, you're probably good to go on what you're using. But this is just what the explanation is. On weapons with like heavy multi-shot, a lot of times, like especially on like the Brahma, because like when you're running around the star chart, my Brahma's hitting for like 20k. Maybe I'll get a headshot for something spicy, but like most of the time I'm not doing big damage. But I know for a fact it can hit for the millions. It's because as the enemy finally gets tanky enough to take all the multi-hit, that damage is finally calculated in, where the enemy would have been dead by then. Like the Tsar and the Brahma are notorious for this. But this is an explanation of what's causing that. And if you're doing higher level runs, or maybe you want to do a survival, make sure to take into a calculation, or take into account, if your weapon has multiple instances of damage. I think the other one that's bad for it is the Call Star, actually, which is literally the pistol version of the Brahma, and is unironically a fantastic weapon. Like, it's literally a pistol version of the Brahma with, like, the extra grenades and everything. But yeah, this is why your damage seems to go up as the enemy level gets higher. But thank you for coming for my TED Talk. It's a small rant, but I've had people ask in the past that I just wanted to get the answer out there. Thank you.